Welcome to your Time Management Revolution. This is Time Management Fixer Helene Segura. In today's episode, I'll be sharing a previously recorded interview during which we're discussing time management and mind management. Enjoy!
Welcome to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Talk radio to inspire, inform, and stimulate. Bringing you enlightened discussions with authors, creatives, innovative business and health professionals, and ordinary people living extraordinary lives, sharing their expertise and life stories, making a difference one word at a time. Now, here's your host, Vicki St. Clair.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. So we are kicking off the new year with someone whose mantra is kick chaos to the curb. And I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty good to me. After last year, I'm sure many of us would welcome that. Today, we're discussing challenges that almost everyone is dealing with on some level, from lack of focus and motivation to feeling impatient, uncertain about the future, wondering what our new normal will look like. Well, my guest is a listener favorite. She's joined us several times before, and I'm very pleased to welcome her back. She's organizing and productivity expert Helene Segura. Her primary focus is in helping stressed out women, entrepreneurs, business people, and teachers regain control of their chaotic lives at work and at home. As the owner of Living Order San Antonio, Helene also facilitates workshops. She's been featured expert on Fox, CBS, and NBC affiliates. And she's the author of Less Stress for Teachers, More Time and an Organized Classroom. And her third book, The Inefficiency Assassin, Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer. And we talked today about some of the issues we've all dealt with the past 12 months. And hopefully we can start pushing that behind us as we move forward into the new year. So here's my guest, Helene Segura. Helene Segura, welcome to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you could make time to join us, Helene, because it's really hard to believe we're almost a year into the global pandemic. We're starting a new year, and COVID has so changed the way that we work and live. And I'm glad we'll have some time here to address some of the challenges that people are facing. And who better to help than you?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that vote of confidence.
So we want this to be as helpful as possible to listeners. So I'm going to say right up front, I am going through these challenges just like everyone else. And I'm sure you are too, Helene. So let's begin with that a bit. How has this impacted you and your family personally?
It's impacted us tremendously. Number one, not being able to see each other, just like everybody else is experiencing. Not having those in-person relationships has been challenging. Not being able to visit our far-off families and spend time with them, especially our elderly family members. And then job-wise, it's wondering if we have jobs. And then once that's in place, having to go through all of the transitions. My husband is a teacher. I used to do a lot of in-person consulting work and had to build up the virtual side of my business. And for a while, it was pretty scary not knowing where the next check was going to come from and how bills would get paid. And then, of course, we have health issues. A lot of other folks have health issues out there. 2020 has been the year of us dealing with major health problems. So it has been quite a year, Vicki, let me tell you.
It has. I think if you can, maintain any sense of humor and sanity, then you're ahead of the game here at this point. That's the way I'm looking at it. So
I totally agree. If you don't maintain that positive mindset, everything is just going to spiral around you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So, and I think the key thing to remember here as well is that you can have all these tricks and tools and resources at the ready. You can have really fantastic coping skills, but at the end of the day, we're still human. And I think we need to be patient with ourselves if we're not accomplishing as much as we think we should, if we're not meeting those goals on schedule like, we normally would have done. So I think that's important to remember every day as well.
Definitely giving ourselves permission to not be at that 150% bar we always set for ourselves, because we are going through a lot of emotions and upheaval. And even when things are going great, sometimes that one thing can just knock you off balance and your day doesn't go quite according to plan. So it's so important just to give our own selves a break, the way we have done to everybody else around us, since all of us are constantly pivoting day in and day out.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, a lot of folks are waiting to get back to normal. I hope we don't get back to where we were. I hope we get back to a better normal myself. But now they're kind of feeling stuck and blocked in a holding pattern because there's so much uncertainty around. We really do have to create our own new normal, and I definitely want to dive into that later on. But one of the key things I'm hearing from people, I don't know if you're hearing the same, is that they feel totally demotivated. They feel disorganized, they lack focus, they have no motivation, etc. And things that normally inspire them don't. I have friends who are avid readers, and they're like, I keep reading the same page over and over. And I've kind of done myself a little bit of that too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's so much spinning around in our heads. And as you and I have talked about before, my mantra of time management is all about mind management. Really, when you boil things down, life management is also about mind management. And so just using the word normal, I know you said we're definitely going to dive into it later, but just that word normal can really get things off kilter. And over the holidays, I watched a semi-cheesy holiday movie called Last Christmas. And because of the frame of mind I was in, one line really made an impact. It was when the character Tom was talking to Kate, and he said, there's no such thing as normal. It's a stupid word. It does a lot of damage. I thought, oh my goodness, yes.
Yes.
Because so many of us keep waiting for that new normal that's around the corner that we've all been talking about since January, February, and March. And the challenge is that we don't know if and when that's even coming. So like you said, we have to create our own new normal. And that means getting our minds focused on what we can control. So that lack of focus, that lack of direction, it's because our brains are spinning, wondering what if, and when is such and such going to happen. And when our brains are full of that, it is so hard to find that time for inspiration, for creativity. We forget about fun, and then it's this vicious cycle of staying in a state of having a muddled brain, and we just go nowhere. So that is the danger of not getting in touch with what's going on in our minds.
Yeah, and you just hit on a key point there as well, that I think, we forget about having fun. I mean, we still have to make fun. I try and make, a couple of hours a day when I go out. I walk in nature a lot, and I try to make that as fun as possible because, I can control those 2 hours with what I'm doing with my time. Another way that I think, I hear from a lot of friends who've said, oh my gosh, I'm so disorganized. The house looks like a tip because people are at home more than they usually are probably. And I think during this time when everything's so out of control, being or at least feeling organized is more important than ever for some people, because it gives you some semblance of being in control. So what do you say about getting organized and how that plays into our day?
For all of us, any type of visual disruption also causes a mental disruption, and that's especially so for those of us who are visual learners. So the clearer we can have our spaces, the more organized we can have our spaces, then the better our brains feel when we're taking a scan, a visual inventory of what we have in front of us. And if you feel like your home is not under your control organization-wise. You don't have to do this clean sweep of the entire house. Start with one small area. You can start with your bathroom counter, or you can start with what you're using for your home office. Just start with one small area. Get it organized so that way you can reach what you need in less than a minute. You know where things are, and you can eventually branch out from there. So this doesn't have to be some kind of all-day project where you tear up the house. Start with one place that you see every day, and you will begin feeling in control when you get that one little space organized.
It's so true, because I started this clearing list, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go into the new year with, getting rid of all my clutter and all the stuff I don't use anymore. So I made this huge long list, which is totally overwhelming. And then I was like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. And finally, I cleaned out one closet, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this closet. That's all I have to do is this one closet. And when I'd done it, I was like, wow, that feels really good. It does. And it gives you impetus to do other stuff then as well.
Oh, exactly. And just like you pointed out, you might have this gigantic list that you'd like to go through, but just pick one small area on there. It might even be one drawer a day you work on, not even the entire dresser or the entire cabinet, just one small space. And as you experience more successes with that organization project, that's going to motivate you to do even more and take on even more. You don't have to let it take over your whole life, but
Right.
it inspires you to keep going.
Right, definitely. And that's a good segue into my next question. I want to talk about motivation a little bit because, and I've certainly been guilty of this too. I'm usually very self-motivated, and I've had days where I'm like, I just don't feel like doing anything. And, I'm such an outdoors person. Being cooped up doesn't really suit my personality, and I've had to find different ways of doing that. One of the things that I know with 100% certainty is that if I start doing something, then I become motivated instead of waiting for the motivation to come. And I wonder if you'd talk about that a little.
Absolutely. Every journey begins with one small step. And that is a famous quote from a Chinese philosopher. And that's so true, just one small step. And a lot of us think if we want to accomplish something, we're already thinking of the big picture and the end result. And we forget about we have to take a lot of little steps to even get there. And to get started, we just need to take that one little baby step forward. And then the next one will come. And maybe that next step is a minute later. Maybe that next step is 3 days or a week later. But the point is you've taken that first step to get out of the inertia and start moving forward. So that's really what's key. Don't let the daunting big picture get in the way of taking that first small baby step.
Right. I don't remember the exact translation, but I do know the word motivation is from Latin derivative of to take action, and then start motion, and then action will follow, basically. Yeah. So let's talk about focus. You've touched on this a little bit, but it is so hard to control that monkey mind sometimes. And, let's face it, the whole world has been dealing with this COVID situation. But added to that, in America, we've had political unrest and social unrest, and it is still continuing. It's not easy to ignore everything that's going on. And I think, it's definitely added to people's monkey mind. And of course, people are, plugging into social media, and that adds to your ADHD. I joke all the time. I've developed ADHD during this thing, But give us some tips, if you would, about when we're in that state and we really need to concentrate and we can't get focused. What are your go-to tools and resources?
I'll tell you up front, I'll cry. So I'll share a personal experience with you, and it happened over the summer with all the upheaval you just described. And on top of all that, in my business having 0 new inquiries after 3 months, I received a diagnosis that I have an incurable lung disease. So
gosh.
that was just the most wonderful news in the middle of a pandemic when everything feels like it's spiraling. And so I had a to-do list in front of me like everybody else, and I just got straight with myself and said, I can't concentrate right now because I have too much in my head. So I gave myself some time to cry, to go for a walk. I gave myself a couple of hours to gather my wits about me and just give myself a big hug, a self-hug, because that's what I needed at that moment. And when we try to force ourselves into something when our emotions need an outlet, we don't end up being very productive. So I wasn't going to take an entire week to just wallow in pity for myself, but I did need those moments just to gather, just to be human and let my emotions out, to cry, to vent, to scream, to question the world, and then get back on track again. So when you're in that moment and you're upset or confused and you just feel that lack of focus, you have different emotions going on, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to step away from what's in front of you so you can gather yourself, whether you just need 5 minutes or whether you need a couple of hours or the afternoon. Gather yourself, because your regathered version of yourself is going to be much more powerful than the one that's struggling in that moment.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry to hear that, Helene. You know, there's a lot of people in similar situations. And I had an aunt who used to tell me if, you know, we had a crisis going on, which families have crises. And she would say, okay, you've got permission to wallow in this for how long? Depending on what the, you know, severity of the crisis was. It might be 24 hours. It might be 3 days. It might be an afternoon. I've always kept that with me, what you just said. I mean, it's so spot on. You know, one of the things that I see too is I'm one of those people who is staying pretty much isolated during this situation. I've worked from home for a long time, so that's not that much different for me. But when I am out there daily walking my dog or, you know, going to battle in the grocery store, I see a lack of patience and tolerance. It seems prevalent. Are you finding that? And if so, I mean, how do we deal with that? You know, I mean, I felt a little bit more impatient in certain situations too.
Mm-hmm. And when I'm looking at the situation in front of me, I do my best to bite my tongue and not get equally impatient and not get angry, but to think about in what types of situations would I be that way as well. I get impatient when I am upset about something. And instead of dealing with that anger that's inside of me, I tend to take it out on my environment, and that means being impatient around other people. And so I just try to empathize with the person in front of me, even though I'm not going to have a conversation from 10 feet away asking them, what's wrong? Are you okay? But I just tell myself, think good thoughts for them because maybe they're having a really terrible day. And then I just make sure I avoid them. take that shopping cart around to the other aisle because they might literally need their space. So not just the 6 feet of social distancing, but just some space to be away from other people, even though they happen to be in the grocery store at that minute. Now, if it's somebody who I am close to and I actually know, then I am going to pause and put everything on hold, whatever's in front of us or whatever we're talking about on Zoom or the old-fashioned way over the phone, and just ask, are you okay? Is there anything you want to talk about? Because especially now when we've been shut off physically from so many other people, I believe that we have been keeping a lot more inside of us, which is not healthy at all. So just taking that time to empathize with the other person and either wish them well mentally if you don't know them or check on them, see what's going on.
Yes, I think, for people who are usually fairly active and get outdoors a lot and do, they may cycle and run or whatever, and they're still out there, of course, but people have slowed down a lot on that. And I think for people like that especially, that kind of thing does tend to bottle up. And I was reminded when I was walking on the beach the other day, and it was pouring with rain, and I came to what I call the Wailing Tree. It's right on the beach on the edge of the rainforest, and a few years ago, I would walk there almost every morning in the winter. And I used to see this Russian lady walk up to that tree and lean on it and wail into the forest. I mean, it was painful. It almost brought me to my knees, and I didn't even know her. This went on for a few days, and then I saw her family were waiting down the bottom, and one of them spoke English, and so they explained that she was mourning her husband, and every day they brought her there to scream out like that. And I thought, this is what we all need right now. We need a wailing tree, and I'm not making light of that at all.
Right. Yeah, we need that outlet, and fortunately she had a tree, and not all of us have some kind of space where we can let that kind of primal yell out. So it might be that if you are in a place where it would be inappropriate to yell, perhaps you grab a pillow and go to the most enclosed room of your apartment, your flat, your house, and you have that primal yell there. Or maybe it doesn't have to be a yell. Maybe it's some kind of crazy jazzercise, or maybe it's running in place or jump roping, or doing whatever you're physically capable of in your current condition, but somehow finding that outlet, that's what's so important to make it through all of this, and to keep making it through whatever we're going to face, is to find the outlet. If we can't use our pre-COVID outlet, what new outlet can we use?
Absolutely. So I want to talk about working 24/7. You say this is one of the biggest issues that you see in your seminars. And I just mentioned I've worked from my own studio at home for years, close to 20 years. And I've still found it a little much because I didn't realize how many times I went to the coffee shop during the day. Or I went to the library, just somewhere different to sit. And of course, we've not been able to do that. So tell me what you're finding and what you're advising people to do about this. Because, I mean, it's different for everybody. Some people don't have kids, and they may live alone and they may get lonely and frustrated. Other people may, have kids and can't get a minute's peace. So what are you finding?
What I've found is this whole concept or phenomenon of working 24/7 during COVID is coming from two primary sources. One is not having that physical boundary between professional and personal life. Even for folks who were working from home previously, there's been a loss of that because everybody has gone digital, everybody has gone virtual, and so more people are working around the clock, which leads into the second source. There hasn't been a clear set of expectations between people who work with each other in determining what is an appropriate response time. So what happens is, especially in a department environment where all of your coworkers are working from home, nobody can just stop by your desk and ask you questions anymore. We have these different work schedules because people have kids they need to take care of, or elderly parents they need to go check on. So some people might be working from home early in the morning. Some are working a standard 8 to 5. Others are working into the night. So employers have been kind enough to realize that we need to have these flexible schedules. But what happens is when people are sending emails and instant messages during their work time, no matter what time it is, others in their department or on their team are thinking, oh my goodness, this person is sending a message at 6 in the morning. I have to be up in order to answer them so they know that I care about their project. Or this person is sending an email at 10:30 at night. I need to be there for them. So what they've left unspoken is, what is an appropriate response time? Can we stick to the 8 to 5? Can it be by the next business day? And they have not specifically stated you do not have to answer a person right away, especially if they are not working between 8 and 5. So we've had a lack of not setting the expectations, which then circles back around to what I first mentioned, is not having the physical boundary. So you don't have to leave a physical office to come home. Your office is at home. And even if your office is a separate room, sometimes just closing the door will create that physical boundary. But if your office is the end of the couch, it gets even harder.
Right.
Because your office is right there on that screen staring at you, and those notifications are popping up, and they are beckoning you over to that device. So that's why it's really important to create some kind of physical boundary, even if you don't have that separate office. So can you deem one end of your couch as the office and the other end as your social space? Or do you have a hiding place for that device? So when you're supposed to be, quote unquote, off work, you can be. And you're not using that device, you're not tempted by that device. So having that physical boundary and then also clarifying expectations with the people you work with as far as communicating, that is so key in getting away from working 24/7.
Yes, and I've never ever, I have a smartphone obviously, but I've never set up email on my smartphone because the amount of email I get, it would drive me nuts. I'd be on it all day long. And I think there are little things like that we can do as well, just put some restrictions on things. Actually, my friend's husband put a lock on his wife's office door. I think in part because he was missing her because she'd be disappearing in there all night. And he's like, we're going to put a lock on that and we're actually going to lock it at night and then you can go hide the key.
That's great. Whatever it takes to create that boundary, because otherwise we are constantly, let me check this one more email. I bet something has come in and I can get XYZ done and maybe I can get ahead. But all you do is you keep on working. So that's great, putting a lock on there.
Yeah. And, I looked up the date this happened because I remember we talked about this before because my family's in Britain and they were talking, my brother was having this meltdown with email as well because he got so much. And he said that we need to adopt what the French have just done. And this happened in 2016. And French employers they were told by the government, I guess, that French employees have the legal right to avoid work emails outside of working hours. And companies with, I think it was more than 50 workers, had to draw up a charter of good conduct and setting the hours when their teams were not supposed to send or answer emails. And there's absolutely no reason we can't do something like that within our groups.
Oh, definitely. And it doesn't have to be a formal contract, just having an informal conversation.
Right.
When I was working with an agency that had team members on multiple continents, they had to work different times because each one of them is waking up and going to sleep in a different time zone. So just having a 10-minute conversation about what is an acceptable time frame for which you can respond, that would be great. So if you want to go the French route and you want to have all sorts of official contracts, that's fine too. But if the company leadership where you work isn't ready to step in and make this blanket expectation for everybody, you can definitely start with your own team.
Right. So let's look at setting ourselves up for success here. Because this obviously is going to continue for a while. The pandemic has no sign of slowing down right now, so remote working is going to continue. And some of the issues for remote workers, they've been known for a long time, but with the increase in remote workers, I think it's really highlighted some of these issues. For example, in 2019, it was reported that 30% of office workers self-reported depression compared to almost 60% of remote workers. And then 60% of freelancers reported work-related loneliness and anxiety, feeling like they're missing out. And of course, we're seeing that on a much bigger scale now. So what do you how are you talking to people about creating connection and keeping connection? And, there are some people who have FOMO, fear of missing out,
Right.
and others are dealing with it better. But for those who do feel that work-related loneliness, what are you telling them?
I'm encouraging them to have some kind of social network gathering virtually because we haven't been able to do it physically, therefore it needs to happen virtually. And to be cautious, especially if the person who wants to do this is a team or department leader, to be cautious of combining this with a standard work meeting. So with some organizations, they're trying to incorporate team building and networking and socialization and getting down to business all at once, and a lot of times without sending out any kind of agenda or any kind of topic expectation. And so it's confusing to a lot of people. Hey, are we being sociable right now, or are we conducting business? So I encourage those who want to connect with others either at work or maybe even outside of their company. Remember the good old days when we went to networking events and we met people from outside our realm. So creating those small pockets of Zoom contacts. And I would like to be able to say that there is a better virtual way to do things, but whether it's through Zoom or through Microsoft Office Teams, having smaller pods of people, it's really hard to make social connections when you have a group of 100. So if you can keep it small and have maybe 5 to 6 folks on there, it's a lot easier to carry on a conversation. If you do need to have that larger group of 100, then use the breakout room features so that way you can have people into smaller pods. But it should be clearly stated ahead of time what the purpose is. So is this going to be a mandatory social networking event for your office? Is this optional for those who would like to join in? Will any work be discussed, or is it purely social? So creating the chance to have those types of events is really important, and if no one in your company has thought of this yet, then maybe you can approach them about those folks putting it together, or ask if you can and just start with that small pod. But it's just so important to keep up with those social contacts, especially for those people who crave the social interaction. Not everybody does. Some people are totally fine being on their own and not having this interaction. They're actually glad about not having it. But not everybody is like that, so we need to make sure everybody's needs are met.
Yeah, one of the things that we use as a family, and I have used it with small teams too, is WhatsApp. I love that application because we have video conferencing, we can upload all kinds of things on there, you can create groups. It's just worked really well for me and my family. So areas that we see as critical to creating a better new normal, again, because of the uncertainty, how do we get clear enough to envision our new normal? What kind of questions should we be asking ourselves now? What kind of actions should we be taking so that we make sure we don't fall back into a normal that's decided by somebody else?
Right. I think the number one question you can ask yourself is, what do you have control over? When we feel out of control, we feel powerless and we feel like we can't do anything. So if you sit down or go for a walk, because we think really well when we walk, according to neuroscience, and it is true, focus on what you can control. Can you control how much focus you have? Can you control the direction you would like your life to take? Can you control how much time you spend worrying? Can you control how much time you veg out versus go have fun versus be productive? Can you control how much self-care you implement?
Right.
We all have control of bits and pieces of that, so how much do you want to have control over? And once you've determined what you have control over, then you can begin deciding, what do you want to do with those different parts of your life? What would you like to accomplish? And then you can make literally appointments with yourself on your calendar to make sure that you follow through with these items that are important to you.
Right. So given that you've also gone through changes, I mean, how do you envision your new normal, Helene?
I envision my new normal as constantly pivoting. And pivot is a word that was used constantly this year, but I think that's something that we have to get used to. So what I plan to operate under is to hope for the best, but plan for whatever I can and just be ready to turn on a dime. As a super structure type A person, I crave routine and I crave everything being aligned, and we all know that if you work with humans or you work with technology, you have to have allowances for the unexpected things that crop up. I have learned to have a lot more time for the unexpected, to have more room in the schedule to pivot and to turn things around whenever I need to. So that is the overall plan. But what I plan to do is just make sure that I have multiple ways of being successful in my work. I have multiple ways of finding success in my personal life, and I have multiple ways of taking care of myself and making sure I have those outlets. So no matter what the situation is, I will be able to find a way through it.
Yeah, love it. And you have a blog on your website about gratitude, about how it can impact productivity. Just give us a word on that, if you would.
Sure. So many times we are focused on what we want to accomplish that we forget quite often about what we have accomplished and what we actually have in our lives. So when we reflect and we start first with not what we haven't gotten done and not with what we have left to do, if we instead start our reflection with what are my wins, no matter how big or small, what are my accomplishments, what should I be grateful for? And when you start with that kind of positivity, it helps keep your brain positive. Even when some really lousy things get dumped in your lap and put right in front of you, keeping that positive mindset is going to help you get redirected and refocused so much more quickly.
Great information, Helene. I so appreciate you taking time to talk with us today and get us off to a good start in the new year. And what would you like to leave our listeners with? What haven't we talked about that you think is really important?
I think we have covered just about everything. We did touch a bit on uncertainty and worries, and if we can allow our brains to accept the fact that there will always be uncertainty in life, probably more so in the next 12 to 18 months. And if we, instead of waiting around for that new normal to show up, we say this is going to be our normal and I am ready for it, we will be able to keep plugging away.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I know listeners can find out much more about you at your website, livingordersa.com. And of course, the book that we first talked about when you first came on the show was The Inefficiency Assassin, Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer. And that's a great book and it's still doing really well. So good to see that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate those plugs, Vicki.
And I want to leave our listeners today with a couple of numbers to call for anyone who's experiencing high levels of stress, anxiety, or depression. There's always a person at one of these hotlines to help. So don't be afraid to reach out for support. Reaching out does not show weakness, it shows strength. And these hotline numbers are the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255. And you can also text the crisis line at 741-741. 741-741. All right, that brings us to the end today. So I want to mention that we've also had many conversations over the years with some of the world's best mental health experts and neuroscientists around coping with the depression and anxiety that many are feeling right now. You can find all of that at conversationslive.net. And you can also, if you want to give feedback on today's show, that's where you can find me too, conversationslive.net. So until next week, stay healthy, stay strong, and start planning your new normal now.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and then flame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicki's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.